Christ, who has victories over drug addictions and alcohol, who currently struggles with pride and anger. I'm Tracey.
Hi, Tracey.
Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Let me start with a little background. I didn't grow up going to church with my family. I would go to vacation Bible school when our babysitter would take us to the Assembly of God Church as a kid. This is where I first was introduced to Jesus. I would also sometimes go to church when some of the teens from that same church came by and picked us up for church on Sunday. It was never with my parents that took me to church as a kid. I came from a family of alcoholics. My father, my brothers, all of his brothers, my grandfather were all alcoholics. Alcohol is how they dealt with their feelings and problems. They drank and didn't dare talk about their feelings. That was taboo. So at a young age, I learned that talking about your feelings wasn't okay. You just drank to deal with them. You bottled them up inside and drank them away. As a child, I watched my dad come home slaughtering drunk, and my mom would have to help him into the house after they went out. One Christmas, we were waiting on my dad to come home so we could open Christmas presents. Guess what? He came home drunk and had been fighting with someone, and someone had bit him on the thumb. When I was in the 4th grade, my dad got a job working construction. We moved to Olathe, Kansas. I was outside playing, and some of the college kids from the Nazarene College invited me to go to their vacation Bible school. As I didn't know anyone, I went. So, little did I know, this was the start of God's plan for me. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Proverbs 16:9. In the 5th grade, we moved to Texas because the construction boom was big in the 80s. Then after my grandmother died, my dad decided he needed to be closer to his little brothers. That was his downfall. When we moved, he got to hanging around with some of the younger people he worked with. His drinking got worse. By now, I was a teenager. My dad would come home get drunk, and instead of hanging out with my friends after school, I was babysitting my drunk dad. This was the beginning of the resentment and anger growing inside of me. I wanted to be hanging out with my friends, not babysitting my drunk dad. I also had conflicting feelings growing inside of me, inside my heart. You know the old saying, mama's boy, daddy's girl? Well, that's not how it was in my family. It was mama's girl, daddy's boy. This was the cause of a lot of hurt feelings and emotional issues over the years. Then when I was 15, my dad left my mom for another woman. I felt betrayed. I felt like I was left in the hands of the enemy. So when some of my older friends asked me to go hanging out with them one night, I went. They were the cool kids, and they had beer. I gave in to their peer pressure, and I started drinking. When I started drinking, all the resentment and anger towards my dad went away. I realize now that was Satan fooling me into a false security, but back then I didn't care. I just didn't want to fall anymore, because after all, I loved my dad. Well, things went on, and my parents worked things out. And when I was 17, my dad went to work in Washington, D.C., and was gone a lot. Again, the anger and resentment, feelings came back. This led to my introduction to pot. This stuff really made me feel happy. Then I started working construction with my dad, and I kept using, and I was drinking and drugging. But some of the resentment and anger went away, and I forgave my dad. The first taste and feelings from drinking and pot got into my system, and I liked it. I liked masking my feelings by drinking and smoking pot. This was the only way I had learned to deal with them. Then one night, someone had talked me into trying methamphetamines. I hesitated at first, but then I went ahead and tried it. Boy, when I smoked that stuff, I sure got down with it. Everything I didn't have energy to do before, I did then. Well, it wasn't long before some guy came along with some new stuff for me to try. This time it was cocaine. Well, my experience with cocaine, as it was with meth, after I started smoking dear cocaine, the next thing I knew, someone was slapping me in the face, and I felt someone say, I hear someone saying, "Are you okay?" I felt cold water on my face as well. I found out later that my heart had stopped, and I had no pulse. I went outside and I looked up at the sky. I had thanked God for not letting me die that night. Revelations 21:7 tells us, "Those who have victories will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." I swore right then and there that I would never smoke cocaine again. Until this day, I haven't. Well, I turned 25. I met and married my first wife. Our relationship didn't start off in the correct way. We got married because she was pregnant with my oldest daughter. Things seemed to go okay at first. Then after my daughter was born, the problems started. She started seeking attention from other men. It was behind my back at first, and then openly later on. The fighting started, and the resentment began. To deal with this, I turned to my old faithful habits of drinking and drugs. Lost my place. I started drinking so I didn't have to deal with my feelings that came along with being cheated on and the fighting that was going on. My frame of mind was if I ignored it, it would go away. Then I got a job with a guy that had the hookup for the pot. So back to my old ways I went. I was back in my comfort zone of booze and drugs. This is the way I didn't have to deal with my problems. In 1999, my son was born. My wife told my sister that she wasn't sure that I was the father. I was brokenhearted. So my drinking and drugs use got worse. And in 2000, it came to blows when I came home and found her in bed with another man. It was all I could take. I left and took the kids. Well, being a single dad and trying to work with a 4-year-old and a toddler was more than I could handle. I called her mom and told her I needed help to come get the kids for a week. After a week, they wouldn't let me have the kids back or even talk to them on the phone. I was crushed, and I didn't know how to handle the hurt and the anger I felt. Back to drinking and drugs I went. It was all I knew how to make me feel good. When I was drunk or high, I didn't have to feel it all. And in 2001, my dad died. It was a crushing blow for me. I had lost my best friend, my fishing buddy, my everything, my family at this point. I felt like I was in the hands of the enemy. With just my mom and my sister as my only immediate family members, or at least that's the way I saw it. And when the day came pick up my dad's headstone. I disappeared into the bottle because I just couldn't handle it. And in 2002, my life seemed to get back on track. I met my wife Cheryl and we started dating. We had some elephants in the room from the start. One being I had told Cheryl I was divorced when actually I wasn't yet. I had left and I wasn't going back. I just had never gotten around to filing for the divorce. One reason being I had to help support my mother since my dad died and she took almost all my money every week. I hadn't had any extra money to get the divorce yet. We got past that. I did everything I could to run her off. I was afraid of getting hurt again, and I just didn't want to put myself out there again. But to my dismay, she put up with everything I dished out and stuck around. She had no idea of my drinking and drug problem either. I had kept that part of my past from her as well. Then when I hooked up with an old friend of mine from my drug days to be at my wedding, it didn't take long for him to pull me back into my old ways of drug use, pot smoking. That was the start of my lying to Cheryl to cover up my drugs and alcohol use. It wasn't long after we married that we filed for custody of my oldest two kids. The judge granted us custody based on the evidence we had. Well, it wasn't long before she dropped them off after her weekend visit and never came back. By this time, Katrina was 6 and Billy was 4. Does anyone know what it's like to have your 6-year-old daughter ask you why her mama doesn't want her anything to do with her? I sure do. It hurt me. Look at the hurt on her face. The more it hurt me, the more it hurt her, the more it hurt me. Because there was nothing I could do to take the pain away. Well, what do you think I did? I ran back to my comfort zone. I ran back to the bottle and the drugs. And in 2003, my youngest daughter was born as a preemie by C-section. I didn't have any drugs, so I took my wife's pain pills so I didn't have to feel. By this time, my addiction was so out of control, my wife had no idea it was that bad. When she would notice the pain pills missing, I would blame it on my back hurting. Anytime I would get a prescription for pain pills from the doctor, my prescription would be gone within 2 to 3 days. I lost a job not long after because I failed a drug test after a forklift accident at work. So now my addiction was affecting several aspects of my life. When my oldest daughter was in the 2nd grade, she was diagnosed with ADD. And when I couldn't have a drink or get high, I would take her medicine. And when Cheryl would notice the pills missing, she would confront me and I would lie. My drinking was getting out of control. Cheryl could tell when I'd been drinking. She could smell alcohol on a person like a hound dog smells a raccoon. There was one time when I actually wasn't but a few months old that I came home drunk and we got into a fight about my drinking. I pushed Cheryl down on the couch and she was holding our baby. You would have thought that would have been enough to a reality check for me, but it wasn't. Cheryl finally said that we needed to start going to church, so we started visiting and attending. We visited several churches until we found Taylor Park Church of the Nazarene and liked it, so we started attending regularly. But that didn't stop the drinking. There was one time Cheryl went on a school trip, and I was supposed to be watching the kids. Well, I went off and got drunk instead of taking care of my 3 kids. My sister had to come get the kids until Cheryl got home because I couldn't keep away from the bottle. The drinking led to more fighting with Cheryl, and finally she left me for a week. She couldn't take it anymore. She came back when I said I would start going to AA meetings. But that didn't last long. I had a huge problem when they started talking about a higher power. Since we had started going to church, I knew that higher power was Jesus Christ. Then in 2006, on New Year's Eve, my life came crashing down. Instead of going home and spending the evening with my family, I went to the liquor store and bought a bottle and got drunk. Well, I got pulled over and got a DWI. I was lucky that I didn't lose my license. But I did 18 months probation and 52 hours of community service. I did that but would periodically fall off the wagon. I finished my probation with my probation officer never finding out that I'd been drinking, so my addiction went on. I would drink and throw the cans away thinking Cheryl would never figure it out. I would drink through thinking she would never smell it on me. By now my youngest had started taking ADD medicine also. So I had 2 sources of pills when I wanted them. When Cheryl had enough, she threatened to leave me and take the kids, even the 2 that weren't biologically hers. I wasn't fooling anyone anymore. The only thing I was doing was denying that I had a problem. Every time I lied about it and saying I wouldn't do it again, or I hadn't taken the pills, when I really had. Then about 2 years ago, Pastor Mark offered to send some people to a one-day training on Celebrate Recovery. He said, "Hey, I think this would be a great opportunity for our church. Would you like to go?" Little did I know that this would be the path God was laying out for me on that one-day training. Acts 1:7, it's not for you to know the times and seasons for the Father has fixed by his own authority. As I sat there listening to Pastor John Baker speak, giving his story, things started to finally sink in. What really hit home for me was listening to Mac and Mary Owen's testimony. Then I finally did get it. That was 2 years ago. I've been sober ever since.
Amen.
I've had 1 or 2 relapses, but I got right back on that horse. I have pushed and pushed to get Celebrate Recovery up and going at Willowwood. Psalm 73:26 says, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is my strength and my heart and my portion forever. My passion is for those who have hurts, habits, and hang-ups they need healing from. My passion has continued to grow over the past 6 months to the point that Jesus can't hold my excitement. This is where I think God has had a plan for me all along, to share my story